Hey guys, this is the first of two videos on immunology. Doing this while I have a cold, so there's the irony of that. Alright, so immunology, we're going to break this up into two videos. In the first video, we're going to cover innate immunity, which is the first and second line of defense. You can kind of think of this as being a war that is constantly going on between your body and various different things that are pathogens around you. The first and second line of defense are both non-specific defense mechanisms, which means that they act the same way on a whole variety of different bacteria and fungi and viruses. They don't act differently for each of the different versions or each of the different, say, viruses, for example. Acquired immunity, the second video is going to focus more on that. That is also known as specific immunity. That one is going to involve cells that are very, very particular to only acting very strongly against very particular viruses or bacteria. All right, so starting first of all with the first line of defense. All right, so the first line of defense here is going to be barrier defense. Things that keep what's inside in and what is not inside away. So barriers including your skin, that'll help to protect you against, all of the various different pathogens that you touch all the time. Really anything that encounters inside your body that encounters things from the outside, such as your nasal cavity and your respiratory tract, those things are lined with a mucous membrane, which is also going to be very protective and keep what is outside and trap it, the things that could be pathogenic. And then there are also various, in both the skin and the mucous membranes, there are secretions that will, for example, change the pH of your skin in order to make it a less wonderful environment for bacteria to start to grow. All right, so we're going to start with the first line of defense, a little bit more on that, and then we'll get to the second line of defense, which is also non-specific. Okay, so the first line of defense, once again, is barriers. There are various different protective proteins. For example, lysozyme is produced in your tears, which is just something that is going to help to digest bacteria and things like that that you get in your eyes. All right, second line of defense. All right, so second line of defense is going to have a variety of different kinds of cells. And so the first line of defense was not a cellular defense. It wasn't like you have any white blood cells involved at all in your first line of defense. But the second line of defense is going to utilize some of the white blood cells, particularly those things that are phagocytes. Phagocytes, remember, those are going to be engulfing bacteria and cell debris and fungi and anything. They eat things in order to get rid of them. So here's an awesome picture of a phagocytic white blood cell that is engulfing many of these rod-shaped bacteria that are around it. That's definitely second line of defense. It doesn't act specifically on only a particular bacterium. It eats everything. And there's other different kinds of phagocytic cells as well. The neutrophils and the monocytes are kind of the main ones. Okay, so monocytes, they mature into macrophages, which the name means big, macro, big, and then phages are eaters. And then there's other kinds as well. Eosinophils I'm not going to spend much time on, but they're kind of particular to parasitic invaders. So all of these neutrophils, macrophages, eosinophils, those are all different kinds of white blood cells. There's not just one kind of white blood cell. Also, there's the natural killer cells, another kind of white blood cell. They have a great name, don't they? Natural killer cells. These are your first line of defense. They're going to be the soldiers that get to the battlefront first, and they're just pretty crude. They release chemicals to the area, just destroy everything, and try to get rid of infected cells in that manner. All right, there's also some non-cellular components in the second line of defense as well. Complement is something that both acts on the second and the third line of defense. It's involved with that. But complement is something that can recognize bacterial or fungal cell walls. So it's a protein that can tag something that is non-self, and that lets the immune system know, hey, eat this one, this is not good. And then there's the interferons. Interferons can also trigger immune response as well. That's in a non-specific way. Interferon, I think, is the best way to describe it is like a neighborhood warning protein that a cell that has been infected by a virus, remember there's a virus inside of it then that's cloning itself, it can send out interferons. So your human cell sends out the interferons, which is basically sending out a message to the neighborhood cells around it. Oh, be careful! There's a virus nearby. So it's a cell communication piece. And then those cells nearby that aren't infected can do things to protect themselves. Okay, so this is just an awesome microscope image of the inside of the trachea, and here you can see two different kinds of cells that are both useful in the second line of defense. Here you have, or is that actually first line of defense, excuse me. These are mucus producing cells, make the mucus, and then you also have ciliated cells that can beat and move some of the cellular debris back up your trachea so that you can end up swallowing it to get rid of it. All right, inflammatory response is something that is second line of defense. Inflammatory response happens when you have a breach in the first line of defense, okay? So you have an injury, you have an owie, you have a cut in your skin or something like that, a way that the bacteria, the pathogen, can get inside. All right, so what ends up happening with inflammatory response, actually I'm going to go to the image and then we'll come back to this. Where's inflammatory responses image? There it is. All right, love this picture. All right, so inflammatory response happens when you have a breach in the first line of defense. Okay, so here we have a pinprick, but it could be a lot of different kinds of things. It could be a paper cut. It could be, this could be something that's even just like a clogged pore. It could be acne you're dealing with here, to be honest with you. It could be a mosquito bite, any of these things. All right, so anyway, we have a breach in the first line of defense, and introduced with that particular owie, we also have these orange bars. Those are bacteria. Okay, so we have some pathogens inside of us that we're able to get in. Those cells that are nearby, they send out these chemical signals. A lot of these cells are called mast cells that are all around your body, and the chemical signal that they send out is histamine. Definitely need to know about histamine. Histamine tells the capillaries nearby that they should dilate, and then they end up with increased permeability. So that white blood cells can leave the bloodstream. And the white blood cells do this. Don't think that they always stay in your arteries and veins. They don't. They migrate out and patrol around between your body cells a lot. So in this case, that's what's happening here. Those white blood cells are migrating to the position of the injury. And basically, the point of this is that then they can eat up all of the pathogens that are around. So that's great. Second line of defense. The response, or what you notice when you have inflammation going on, is because you have increased permeability in the capillary, you're going to end up with fluid building up in the area, so the area will look swollen. Sometimes that swollen area will irritate nerve endings, which will make it itchy, possibly. Quite often that area looks red because of the increased blood supply to the area. You might have pressure in the area. Sometimes if you have an injury, it throbs, and that's the increased pressure that you can feel from the area. So redness, swelling, all of that happens because of this capillary that is on purpose leaking fluid to the area in response to the histamine signals that are around it. Now, sometimes this is kind of cool stuff with allergies. People that their mast cells are kind of confused and they release histamine even when the thing that's inside of you is not truly a pathogen. It might be an allergen. But really, allergies and the responses that you get to it are just a result of histamine being released improperly. And so what that ends up doing is causing itchy, watery eyes and things like that. It might cause sneezing and stuff because of fluid leaking into the nasal cavity. if that's the area where you're having the problem. And if you have all over, like those really serious allergies, what ends up happening is that you end up with a systemic response to something that is a chemical trigger, like peanuts, for example. When you digest that and you start to absorb some of the peanut components, they get circulated throughout the whole body. And then the whole body starts to have this histamine response where all of the capillaries in the body start to dilate and become more permeable. And that's what causes shock, because the blood pressure just plummets when that's happening. And that's what anaphylactic shock is. Antihistamines can help to prevent allergic responses, because what they do is they block the chemical signal, an antihistamine. Okay, that sums up the first and second line of defense. So the first video is done. The second video, that third line of defense, is a little bit more complicated. The video might be a couple minutes longer than this first one was. But here you go. Go take a break.